Hello, my co-highs. Hope you're all doing well. I am your host, Tyrann Senpai, and welcome to another Dinosauria reaction with the Dino Virgins. We got Charles, Lorana, Hacker, Jurassic, Kula, and Meerkat joining us this time around. But yeah, we are here to react to the behind the scenes of Monsters Down Under. We all quite liked the short film, and I think we're just ready to see what went through David's head while he was making it. I'm really looking forward to this. But before we do get started, I just wanted to say support your indie animators. Go watch his behind the scenes video before you check my reaction out, because, you know, he did all the work. He deserves all the subscriptions, all the likes, all the monetization, and stuff like that. You know, like supporting artists that they can even do this sort of thing. So yeah, show your love and support to him, and then come right back to react to me in case you haven't seen it. With all that out of the way, let's check out the making of Monsters Down Under.
Hello, my name is David, and in this video I'll be covering how I created Monsters Down Under, the 8th film in my Dinosauria animated series. I'll be going over everything: the science behind the film, my concept art, how I 3D model, rig and animate these prehistoric animals, and even go over how I created this big clay Kronosaurus sculpture I made for the film as well.
Cat!
The animated short films may be the final result, but there is so
I want
much
to eat it,
more
Kula said.
research and artwork that goes into each and every one of these projects.
Oh god, I got so many comments
Let's get started.
in my reaction of people telling me names I didn't recognize. Including the fucking isopod looking thing.
What were they?
I don't remember the name, but I know someone left a comment on it. And if anyone leaves a comment on this video, I will fine you.
When I started work on Dinosauria Volume 2, I set out to make 5 new films, so I needed 5 new ideas.
Yeah.
Terrible Lizards and Hunted by Moonlight, as well as the upcoming Fighting Dinosaurs and 2 Titans, all solidified themselves pretty quickly on this list. But the obligatory Ocean episode I wanted to make, episode 3, took me the longest to really nail down.
Yeah, I remember.
The Ocean episode of Dinosauria Volume 1 was Sea and Sky. And
I remember this particular short film being a pain for him to animate. I don't think it's a bad film, it's
just the shortest and the least impressive. It was also very technically challenging, and I struggled a lot when it came to rigging and puppeteering the pterosaurs, as well as animating the sea. One of my main goals for Volume 2's Ocean episode was to tackle the sea again and do it better.
Well, I'd say he did a pretty good job, all things considered. What the?
The first serious idea I had for Volume 2 Episode 3 was going to be called Hell's Aquarium.
That's actually a pretty nice looking Hesperornis.
This film would have taken place in the Western Interior Seaway, but this time follow a young Hesperornis on his first dive.
Ooh, like penguins.
I even got as far as creating character models for this film and doing some test animation.
And this was cancelled.
However, I very quickly realised that I'd much rather explore new places in Dinosauria Volume 2 than return to old ones.
Fair enough.
The second serious contender for the obligatory
he has an amazing eye for creature design.
Fire and Water, which was going to tell the story of the famous Borealopelta fossil.
Oh, that fossil!
This, frankly beautiful ankylosaur specimen, was found in a marine deposit, and the film was going to tell a potential story of how this animal lived, how it died, and how it ended up buried at the bottom of the sea.
I would have loved to have seen that. Yeah, that would have been cool.
Fire and Water was also scrapped, partly because of
Me too.
how technically ambitious
I envy his drawing as well,
were going to be, but mainly because I couldn't confidently depict any pterosaurs in this setting, and I really wanted to animate another big pterosaur. I don't remember exactly what first drew me to Australia for the final film. I think I was just reading about Mesozoic formations that include both
the big
terrestrial and marine life.
frigate bird like pouch.
Stumbbling upon the Tullabuck Formation in Queensland. And it was a far more alien and bizarre place than I expected.
Birdie.
You see, modern Australia is hot and dry. But during the early Cretaceous, the continent was still attached to Antarctica, so it was instead very wet and cold for Mesozoic standards.
Okay.
It was a weird place, with a giant inland sea covering a lot of the landmass, full of animals that, to me, feel just a little too ancient for the time period, with pliosaurs and ichthyosaurs feeling a whole lot more like the last echoes of the Jurassic over what I associate with the Cretaceous.
Don't hurt yourself. I'm sure he'll pronounce the name out loud later.
I got so interested in this world that I had decided that my main goal at this point for this film was to just take the viewer to this place that was totally taking over my imagination. I wanted the film to be an eerie journey through this totally otherworldly environment. Almost as if the film was exploring a different planet. A beautiful place, full of amazing things, but unknowable, ancient, and alien things.
Right. Also, I was not the only one who commented on the fact there was a cloaca on the Chronosaurus model.
There's an amount of uncertainty, of individual interpretation to all of my Dinosauria films. An amount of ambiguity to the story and motivation of the characters.
One of my favorites.
These characters don't speak. There's no narration. They're not people.
Yeah, that one's my favorite out of the
I think this
batch.
ambiguity is a huge strength.
My
of the
favorite.
Series. And
right here.
Monsters Down Under, I
wonder
really
why.
wanted to double down.
It's not
on
just
this
because
type
T-Rex
of
is in it.
Mysterious, ambiguous storytelling. I wanted all of the creatures above ground, the dinosaurs, to be pretty easy to read, so I based their behaviours more so on mammals. Things like dogs and cows, animals that human beings find pretty easy to relate to and understand.
That would explain the stretching.
Yeah.
This was to contrast everything in the sea, that I instead wanted to feel like totally unknowable, ancient eldritch beings.
Kula says, interesting.
Nice.
I wanted this film to feel alien. It's full of strange interactions between strange creatures. Even the main plot, the most structured part of this film, this very long and very violent interaction between these two Chronosaurus, is never totally explained to the viewer.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of like that.
I didn't want people to totally understand what these animals were doing. But what they're doing isn't random either. It's not without reason. Their actions are very natural and very purposeful. I personally love watching animals do weird animal stuff that doesn't make sense, and attempting to understand their world.
Yeah.
Totally alien perspectives.
That's what I liked about
That feeling
Prehistoric
of
Planet.
not quite knowing what you're seeing, but being infatuated is the exact feeling of like natural world mystery and fascination that I wanted to capture with this film. Which I'm about to totally shatter as I explain what happened during that Chronosaurus scene. The reality of what happens between these two animals is that a younger male enters the territory of a larger and older female. He kills a plesiosaur to both get her attention and to present it to her as a gift, and attempts to court her with deep, bellowing calls.
Go back, I missed something.
He's unscarred, so she isn't convinced. The pair then surface, take a deep breath, and wait. This is a speculative, ritualized
when you're laughing at
dance,
something.
or courtship challenge, more like.
They were talking about how he's going to tell what exactly happened.
See how long he can remain submerged while she stares him down.
So it was like a test.
An hour passes.
Yeah,
the
that was
inexperienced, unscarred male keeps bellowing, running out of air too quickly,
but
is forced to resurface.
Not a test of strength.
The scarred female, being a big, angry, predatory sea monster, sees this as a moment of weakness and can't help but violently attack him.
Okay.
Yep, weakness.
That makes sense.
However, he doesn't give up. Attempting to prove his strength once again, bleeding and bruised,
Yeah,
the pair take another breath.
It's about strength.
The female, at this point, with blood in the water, becomes very restless, and unfortunately, the male barely lasts a few minutes this time due to his injuries. He makes another break for the surface, she attacks him once again, and he passes out.
I just straight up thought he died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The female now thinks it's over.
We all
She's
did.
dealt with the intruder. But after sinking to the bottom of the sea, the male
Nah, you gotta
miraculously
put
gets a
faith
second
in-
wind,
faith in,
springs
bro.
to life, and races for the surface. Reaching, inhaling, and crashing back down into the sea, he bellows once again. No longer unscarred, he has finally proved his strength, and the female joins him in song.
Typically, I would criticize that mammal-like behavior, but here I can accept and respect it. Yeah, I feel like it was
The film
alright
then
here.
jumps ahead to springtime, perhaps a year, 2 years later, and the female gives birth to a new calf. A calf that shares the young male's colours.
Yeah,
Oh.
I noticed it, because like the green patch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The sculpture!
Oh,
I have created large
Yay!
sculptures for each and
Let
every
bro
single
cook,
one of my
let's see what he
Dinosauria
does.
films. And for Monsters Down Under, I of course decided to sculpt a
Dang,
Kronosaurus.
bro.
I started the sculpture with a piece of aluminium
Dope as
wire,
fuck.
which I wrapped in paper, and then wrapped in foil.
I love how he
and then
incorporates
wrapped
such
in
small
clay.
details. I agree.
In addition to this big
Yes.
ugly slug, I also
Ugly
flattened out
slug.
4 flippery shapes and rolled out what would eventually become the tail and the head.
It looks really nice.
I then waited for all of these pieces to dry and embedded them all, except
Why
the
does it
head,
look like
into
potato?
the main body of the piece.
It kind of does look like a misshapen potato.
I use air drying clay.
Even cool is like, I want to eat it.
Sculptures, but I've also gotten into the habit of using milliput to strengthen certain
I want to
areas
eat it
of
more,
my
he
models.
says.
Milliput is just a whole lot more durable, so I use it for small parts
Oh,
or
milliput,
sticky outy
that's what
parts,
Marco
things
uses.
like the flippers,
Yeah.
which would otherwise be prone to snagging on things and breaking. I sculpted the head completely separately, because it's the focal point and therefore requires the most attention. The teeth were a challenge. I must have resculpted the teeth on this model like 5 or 6 times before I was finally satisfied. Eventually, I decided to just sculpt the teeth separately in milliput and push them into the wet Daz clay to create this final snaggle-toothed look.
I mean,
Nice.
it looks nice,
I
yeah.
attached this sculpture to its base very early on, and
Oh,
this gave
that's-
me a
it
super
needs more
convenient
neck.
handle to hold on to while
There
I
you
worked
go.
on it. However, the
Hook
more
fang
I
looking.
bulked this piece out, the more clay I layered on to form the final shape, the more front-heavy it got. And the
Oh.
moment I finally attached the head, the whole piece fell forward.
Yeah, that's a problem.
So
Oh no.
I was forced to saw the original base off, drill a new hole into the sculpture at an angle that would better support its weight, and completely remounted it.
That works.
At this point, I was happy with
Yay.
the general shape of the Kronosaurus and started the final layer of detail work. To do this, I flattened out thin layers of Daz air drying clay,
He's got wet
wrapped
fingers.
that clay around the model, and began carving the final skin details into this wet canvas. These animals would have had scales,
stuff he
but
uses
these
for the
scales
skin.
would have been very fine and impossible to see at the scale my model is at. A smooth-skinned Kronosaurus is not a fun Kronosaurus to sculpt, though, so I decided to exaggerate the skin details a little with scales and wrinkles and folds where you'd expect to see them.
And say it with me, folks. He sculpted a
Once
cloaca.
I was happy with the sculpt, so I primed the piece.
'Cause
I
fuck
painted
you,
the piece,
meerkat.
And I sang to the
God
piece.
damn it.
Oh my god.
He's going crazy.
I fucking love this guy.
This sculpture came together
he's amazing.
incredibly quickly. It was one of the easiest pieces
Cat.
of the series so
Cat.
far. This was for many reasons. This is a comparatively simple body form with no claws or hands or feet. None of this animal really has to look like it's bearing any weight, like how a terrestrial animal would, so that wasn't a concern. But most importantly, this whole piece is floating, and the pose is super open.
Don't
This
make that
meant I
joke,
could
Kula.
sculpt away
One of
any
these days
part
he's
of the
gonna drop the
sculpture at any
sculpture
time.
in these
Made it even
gags.
easier since the sculpture has its own
I hope
handle
not.
that I
Please
can
don't.
grab and turn and manipulate without fear of ruining my work.
Especially because this piece looks
I
really good.
love this sculpture. I think it's one of my best in a while.
So bad.
It just looks alive. It looks marine. It looks like a lizard. It looks like a crocodile.
Holy shit, it does have a
looks like
cloaca,
real
Kula said.
animal. In fact, this piece is heavily based on another sculpture I made many years ago of a humpback whale and her calf,
Ooh.
which
Look at that whale.
are in very similar poses and I think look very cool next to each other.
Very nice.
Here's my
Yeah.
new Kronosaurus sculpture next to my Megalosaurus and my Scutellosaurus.
I honestly don't know what's my favorite sculpture so far.
And here it is next to the rest of the Dinosauria sculpture family.
Grandma me be like,
Yay.
because like they all look really good. I don't know if I have a favorite among them.
Yeah, I cannot have a favorite. They look all good.
They all look really good. Alright, featured species. Alright.
Really?
Kronosaurus queenslandicus was a pliosaur and is the star species of this film. It lived in Australia 100 to 120 million years ago, with size estimates between 9 and 11 meters in length, making it easily one of the biggest pliosaurs to ever exist.
So just short of 40 feet long.
My Kronosaurus design is heavily counter-shaded, with very dark tones on top and very light tones underneath.
I still like
This
the
is
like
a
green
very
blush
common design
on the throat.
trend in pliosaur paleoart, and
Yeah.
for very good reason. Not just because of Walking with Dinosaurs, these are just the most realistic colours for this animal.
He acknowledged it.
Most marine animals today, especially big predatory ones like sharks and dolphins, orcas, many whales, have stark, dark light countershading just like this. However, there's both a male and a female in this film, and I needed them to have distinct designs so the viewer could easily tell them apart. The male is younger and more colourful, with blue-teal accents, and the female is older, duller, more scarred, and has white, orca-like eye spots.
Which is a nice touch.
Yeah.
I initially toyed with the idea of making one of these animals albino to make them easier to differentiate, but ultimately decided to save that idea for a later film in this series.
Wait, the Sora Poseidon is albino?
Oh yeah, look at the eye.
In Monsters
I'm
Down
invested.
Under, I depict Kronosaurus as a solitary and hyper-aggressive.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And we do have evidence of intraspecific aggression in this species, potentially even cannibalism, with a subadult Kronosaurus skull preserving what look to be bite marks from a larger individual.
So there was a
I
reason
think
for
we
this.
actually have multiple specimens showing this, but it's fitting for a creature named after the Greek titan Kronos, who devoured their children.
Oh, cover your ears, little baby.
The Kronosaurus is also depicted giving live birth in the film. I don't actually know if we have any direct evidence of this in pliosaurs specifically, but live birth is an incredibly common adaptation for marine tetrapods. Amnio eggs just don't survive underwater, and Kronosaurus was definitely not hauling itself onto land like a sea turtle to lay its eggs.
Yeah, it's way too fucking big. It would die trying to get onto land.
Kronosaurus is also shown exhibiting at least some parental care in the film. I don't know exactly how reasonable this is, but it is believed that plesiosaurs gave birth to very few, very large babies, like, say, whales, rather than tons and tons of little babies, like, again, say, sea turtles. And most animals today that pour a ton of resources into one big baby tend to take care of that baby for at least a little while.
Okay, you know what? I was wondering about that. I'm glad I got some clarification. Now it makes
Kronosaurus
sense.
Sound effects
Yeah, it
in
does.
Monsters Down Under do have alligator hisses and elephant grumbles in them, but like virtually every single animal in this whole series, the majority of this creature's voice is my voice, just slowed down, pitch shifted, and combined with other sounds.
I think I know which
Here's
ones
a
it is.
short breakdown of how I created some of these sound effects.
Right, so that's him just like splashing water. Oh. How do you make that noise? I love sound design,
And it's
especially
not
making
just
it.
the grunts, the snorts, and the coughs. I think 95% of the Kronosaurus vocals in this film are based on my voice, including the courtship bellowing.
That's what my grandma sounded like when she snores.
Sounds like a snore.
Oh. That was literally my grandma snoring, the first one. That's
Sticking
really good.
with marine reptiles, the second animal I'll be covering in this video is the plesiosaur Eromangosaurus.
Okay, we have a name.
Although an elasmosauroid, who tend to have very long, very skinny necks, I decided to shorten the neck in my reconstruction and fatten the animal up a little.
Eromangosaurus. That's a new one.
I did this because these seem like reasonable adaptations for an animal living in a cooler sea than most other elasmosaurs. We have found evidence of blubber on other plesiosaurs, so I feel this body form is more than reasonable.
I did not know that.
Plesiosaurs couldn't chew, so like many dinosaurs, they swallowed stones called gastroliths to help grind up food in their stomachs.
I noticed that detail.
It's been suggested
Yeah,
that
I
this
thought that was
extra
really cool.
weight could have also helped these animals submerge themselves. And this little idea inspired one of my favourite moments in this film, in which the male Kronosaurus rips into the gut of the Eromangosaurus specifically to spill the gastroliths.
Yeah, I like that scene. That's like a really good touch
that
of
was
detail.
really
Extra
cool.
weight, the carcass
Yeah,
floats to the
it's nice
surface,
detail.
so he can begin his display. Completing the marine reptile trio, the third animal I'll be discussing in this video is the ichthyosaur Platypterygius.
Platypterygius.
australis, specifically, the species from Australia.
Okay, now we have a name and a pronunciation.
Ichthyosaurs are some of my favourite extinct animals. I just love how weird and stupid they are. Never has a tetrapod re-achieved fish as well as the ichthyosaurs did.
Embrace
I don't think
fish.
it's particularly obvious in the film, but I did create 3 different variants of the species. Perhaps this range of colours is sexual dimorphism, perhaps ontogenetic change, with the older individuals being the more colourful ones. I never really decided.
That's a big fucking fish.
Platypterygius was unfortunately
That's a
quite a
fish?
late addition to
No.
the film, which is why it doesn't
It's a
really
reptile.
do much. It wasn't in the original script.
Yeah, I was like,
just
it's a
really
reptile, why
wanted
would it
an
be a fish?
excuse
I was making the
to
joke because it
3D
looks like a
model
fish.
and animate an ichthyosaur, and this was the only place I could put one.
Alright, pterosaur. Here we go.
The next animal I want to talk about is the pterosaur Halaskia.
Halaskia.
One that I really wanted to get right.
Don't actually me.
One of my main goals for Monsters Down Under was to tackle the same technical challenges I struggled with back when I created Sea and Sky. And by far the biggest challenge working on that film was rigging and animating the pterosaurs.
Yeah, I remember that being a real pain.
I wanted to try again, improve my skills, and do better. All in all,
Which
I
you did.
definitely improved. This
These
Halaskia
look
in the
really
film
good.
has been totally reworked. It's hard to display on
Yeah,
screen, really, but
those.
this is an all-new skeleton, it's an all-new mesh, it's an all-new rig, and it flies, walks, and folds up far better than my Geo Sternbergia did. Fly with me, my brother! Hop, hop!
What the fuck?
What the hell was that?
I do still wish that I could fold the wings further than this, though.
He's even like, what
Something
the
closer
fuck?
To this would be
Gmod
ideal.
S level
But at the
animation.
moment, folding the wings this much on this rig leads to far too many clipping.
Oh, yeah.
errors. Something I will improve upon for my next pterosaur.
Ooh!
Halaskia is an anhanguerid pterosaur, which was only recently described in
Okay.
2024.
Oh!
One
The
doesn't have a
most
nose
complete
bump.
pterosaur ever found in Australia, which was the main reason I chose this species.
Probably female.
It's only 22% complete, but that 22% crucially contains some skull material
juvenile.
which is diagnostic. Premax teeth 4 and 5 are smaller than 3 and 6 in this fossil, which is, as far as I know, unique to this genus. It's kind of hard to tell though in the film because the main Halaskia has 2 teeth missing. While working on this film, I was actually contacted by Rory Duncan, a co-author on that paper,
Ooh.
which then led to the lead author, Adele Pentland, getting into contact with me as well. So super special shout out and thank you to Rory, to Adele, to Zev, to Christina, and all the other people at Chronosaurus Corner. Like, you guys are great. And I hope I did your big, ugly, flappy guy proud.
Huh. Also, Hacker, it can't be a juvenile. It's the same size as the adult male.
The first
Was it?
actual
Yeah.
dinosaur I'll be talking about in this video is Muttaburrasaurus.
Hey!
This guy was a large, herbivorous
My
iguanodont
boy.
and one of Australia's most famous dinosaurs.
Yeah, but it had no bump. Weird.
Yeah,
Really
It could
like my
be
design
female.
for this animal. It might actually be one of my favourite designs of Volume 2, with the reverse counter shading, the blue highlights, and the flapper flabby neck flaps that flap away when it roars. You'll almost always see this animal depicted with a big trumpeting nose. Muttaburrasaurus does have a really big nose, and there's definitely something going on in that region of the skull. But these big inflatable honking structures you always see associated with the species are completely speculative.
It's
I
safe, though.
personally find it very hard to imagine this animal without them, though, which is why I did it too.
Like, I think it's very
In
reasonable
the
to
film,
think
the juvenile
that-
Muttaburrasaurus doesn't quite have these structures yet, and he isn't very good at honking.
You know, I'd love to see
By the
these
end of the
in
film,
the
after some
Jurassic
time has
movie.
passed, the blue coloration has started to appear.
Or any dinosaur movie.
Oh yeah, we caught that detail.
Mm-hmm.
Coonbarosaurus, the
Coonbarosaurus.
small ankylosaur or para-ankylosaur. I'm honestly
What was
quite
the
confused
detail?
as to what's going on
Space.
with
Look
these
at him.
animals. Regardless,
At the end
I'm
of
pretty
the
confident
episode,
that
the little one
Coonbarosaurus
had
was a
blue on
basal
his nose.
ankylosaurian dinosaur and Australia's most complete and best preserved dinosaur.
So it wasn't Min-Me.
This little guy is known from most of a skeleton in articulation, including a decent amount of the skin and the osteoderms. It's a really beautiful fossil.
It looks amazing.
However, this charming little fellow was a little bit frustrating to research. This is because when this beautiful, nearly complete fossil was first described in 1996, it was actually thought to be another species of the far more famous Australian ankylosaur, Min-Me.
Oh,
This was until 2015, when the
Nice.
specimen was reclassified as its own distinct genus and named Coonbarosaurus.
okay.
But because this animal was Min-Me for so long, all depictions of Min-Me you've probably ever seen have actually been Coonbarosaurus.
You all lied.
If Min-Me material is actually super sparse, so when Min-Me is reconstructed even to this day, it is drawing far more from Coonbarosaurus than itself. Which is a bit of a shame, because I think this little guy deserves more credit.
Yeah. Justice for Coonbarosaurus.
Yep.
Yes.
With all of the major characters out of the way, it's now time to talk about the weird and wacky critters of Monsters Down Under.
Alright, let's get some
The
answers.
first of these critters I'll be talking about is the small dinosaur called Nanantius. And I'll be honest with you guys, this is probably not a very good reconstruction of this animal, but it's kind of hard to tell. Nanantius is super fragmentary.
Ooh.
It's a Cretaceous bird, essentially, but it's only really known from a shin bone and some neck vertebrae. And because it's so badly known, my Nanantius is admittedly just a re-edited and retextured version of Birdicus Madeupicus from The Last Tyrant.
I mean, it still looks good.
The next
Yeah.
critter featured in the film is Pachyrhizidus, a ray-finned fish. This is supposed to be the species Marathonensis, specifically, but I couldn't find any confident figures or photos of those fossils, so instead based it more on Pachyrhizidus caneus and Groy, which have far easier to find figures.
Groy.
However, I did find a pretty cool paper about a fossil specimen of this fish from the Tullabuck Formation found infested with over 130 scavenging isopods.
Ew!
Which caught my attention so much that I directly referenced it in the film.
And it's still disgusting.
These little guys are
Yummy.
Run-Ika, I think, which I have almost certainly reconstructed.
He doesn't know how to
large in the
pronounce
film.
them.
I think these guys would have been actually, like, super tiny. The fourth critter I wanted to briefly mention is perhaps a surprising one. This seashell.
Oh,
These things can be seen throughout
Oh.
the film. The young Muttaburrasaurus picks one of these shells up. The shells are scattered all across the beach during the very first shot of the film and make one final appearance during the very last shot of the film. These are a species of Inoceremus, a Mesozoic bivalve, which are so abundant in the Tulabuck Formation and kept being mentioned when I was researching it that I felt I needed to reference them in the film somehow.
I mean,
Eventually, I decided to literally bookend Monsters Down Under with these animals.
I mean, sure, why not?
The second to last critter I want to mention are these ammonites. They're not really based on any particular species because I couldn't really find any definitive Tulabuck Formation ammonite fossils to base them on. But I have no doubt that they were there. Ammonites have been found in Australia. Ammonites were everywhere.
All
Yep,
animals
I
deserve
agree
some
as well.
spotlight, even those. Yeah,
The final and the coolest critter featured in the film is Enketeuthis, a
Enketeuthis.
Cretaceous wiggly woggly.
wiggly woggly. Why?
I decided to include this species to add to the upsetting and alien vibes of Monsters Down Under, but before working on this film I knew almost nothing about wiggly wogglies.
Why?
One of these creatures to life, as well as the ammonite, in detail to 3D model, rig and animate these creatures, I had to learn at least the basics of how cephalopods like these work. How they're built, how they move, which parts are squishy, which parts shouldn't be squishy, which was honestly a whole lot of fun. Like, I will take any excuse to learn about new, weird and wacky animals. And without this research, I wouldn't have any idea what a cephalopod's siphon is, which these guys use in the film to jet propel themselves away when they see the Kronosaurus above.
Bruh.
Before I move on to the next segment, I wanted to announce that I'll be speaking again at DinoCon this year. I'll be doing a big presentation, and I'll also be showing off a
There are a couple
brand
more
new
dinosaurs in this
Dinosauria
shot.
film. I am having so much fun working on Dinosauria Volume 2 that I decided to extend the series from 5 films to 6.
Is this?
Here's a clip.
Oh, nice.
I want to guess this might be Bambi Raptor or something. I know this guy. That's Ionosaurus.
I want a figure of that.
Look at that
DinoCon
horn.
2026 will be held in England at the Hilton
Yes,
Birmingham
Pluto?
Metropole
Maybe.
Hotel on July 25th and 26th.
And that
More information and where to buy tickets at the website on screen.
must
I'm
be
really excited.
Maiasaura.
I loved meeting a bunch of you guys last year, and don't worry if you
Yeah.
can't make it to the event and still want to see this new film. The
That
film
is a
will be
gorgeous
uploaded
looking
publicly here on
Death
YouTube, just like the
Spleetosaurus.
rest of the Dinosauria series, sometime down the road.
It must be a remodel, considering we already have the Spletosaurus.
I know, but that color goes
My
hard
animation
as
style
fuck.
I know.
is a mix of 2D and 3D animated elements. In the simplest terms, all of the characters are three-dimensional.
It sounds like the god
and
from
all
his
the
Dinosauria
environments
series.
are two-dimensional. In this making-of video, I thought it'd be interesting to really go step by step through my
Oh,
creative
there was a
process
third!
to cover exactly how I create these characters and worlds.
I thought it was just 2 of them.
I do all of my 3D animation in Blender, and every single character, be it a dinosaur, a pterosaur, a pliosaur, or a wiggly woggly,
Why?
starts life as a default Blender cube. With this cube, I then subdivide, extrude, and stitch together the basic form of the animal. I
It would
base
be funny
this
to
shape
see
on
steps.
figures of the fossils, with gaps filled in by related species, but honestly, I kinda do most of this by eye. If the shape looks right, it looks right. I don't think I've ever directly followed somebody else's reconstruction.
Oh.
Ever. For example, there's a very large and very cool and very famous skeletal mount of Kronosaurus in Harvard, but that thing is also infamous for being mostly made of plaster and has far too many vertebrae, and its anatomy and proportions are just way off. So I reconstructed my animal shorter, with a comparatively larger head, longer flippers. Honestly, my Kronosaurus looks a whole lot more like this PNSO model. But again, not exactly. For one thing, I'm really just not convinced of this horizontal tail fluke.
Oh
So
dear.
I gave mine a vertical one.
You know, that's definitely a lesson that a lot of
This
artists should learn.
process of researching, educated guessing, going with whatever looks most natural is how I create all of the creatures you see in my films.
Trust your instincts. I agree, Kula. But be open.
Yeah, definitely.
I agree.
My animation models are actually very simple 3D models. And that's because for my 2D, 3D animation style to work, the simpler these models are, the better. I sort of need to treat these 3D meshes like simple blank canvases for the more detailed texture work. I paint these textures onto my models like I would paint a sculpture, in layers, paying special attention to focal points like the head, the hands, and the feet, areas that will likely be seen in close-up at some point during the film.
Tell you what, if we got a dinosaur game like this,
is when all of the little anatomical details are created. The
I know,
folds,
right?
the shadows, the feathers, and
I
the
want a
scales.
game like this.
like this style
It
would look
almost
awesome.
never ends there,
Yeah.
though. I think every single dinosaur I've ever made has gone through texture tweaks over the course of a film's production. These changes can just be aesthetic things, like the face of my Kunbarasaurus, which I slightly redesigned halfway through this project. But more often than not, these changes are for storytelling
That was very
or
subtle.
accuracy reasons. My Kronosaurus, for example, must have gone through 15 different texture variants over the course
It's
of this
pale!
film. Initially, these changes were me trying to distinguish my design more from the Walking with Dinosaurs Leopleurodon, but eventually I also noticed that I put the nostril too far down the snout and
It's
had
a
to fix that
Leopleurodon,
too.
Charlie.
I also
Magical
just created
Leopleurodon.
a ton of different
Magical
variants of the male
Leopleurodon.
and the female to help distinguish them from one another. I wanted them to be
I like
easy
this
to
one.
tell apart, with two
Not that
very
one.
distinct personalities, but without being overly stylized. It was a tricky balance, but these two designs you see here were the ones I finally settled upon.
Yeah.
The next step is to rig the models so they can be animated. This doesn't just mean giving the model an armature, a skeleton, so it can move around. It also requires a lot of extra specific and minute controls to make the character look around, blink, breathe, wiggle, and even speak. At this point, the character is basically finished. It's been 3D modeled, textured,
The pale
rigged,
one looks
and
like he's
ready
seen
to be
things. I
animated.
agree.
The very first thing I do with every new character I make is animate a walk cycle, or a swim cycle, or a fly cycle, depending on the species.
I feel like that's like textbook for any animator.
This gets me familiar with the animal, familiar with the rig, and helps me form the type of personality this character will eventually have.
Animators take
This
notes.
stage is definitely
Yeah.
Write that down, write that down!
as it's the moment all of this hard work
Write that down, write that
starts
down!
to come together.
Meanwhile,
The
sucks
moment
at
that
walk
these
cycles.
fantastic and ancient animals that I love so much finally start to come to life.
Again, can we have a dinosaur game that looks like this, please?
I know.
At the end of the video, he announced, I'm making a new dinosaur
One
game.
dead video game. I don't care. I will find a way.
I will actually hire
I
Dead
will-
Sound as an artist.
While all
I
the
will-
characters
I
in my
will
films
die
are
broken happy
three-dimensional,
knowing that
the
this game
environments are
exists.
two-dimensional. So each of these backdrops is its own individual drawing.
Breath of the Wild
I
dinosaur
often
game.
end up drawing hundreds of these
Oh.
backdrops per film, and to go over exactly how I do this, I'll be using this shot as an example.
Okay. Break it down for us,
I
David.
actually do draw rudimentary storyboards for my films, which I don't think I've ever mentioned before. And that's because they look like this, and therefore are not worth mentioning. But using this storyboard as a template, the very first thing I do is animate all of the 3D elements in the scene, with a very simple mock-up of the environment.
Never
All
played
of this
Breath of the
is
Wild.
done in
Not-
Blender.
Neither have I.
Neither have I.
I've watched
I then
gameplay. It's
zoom
really
out
pretty.
and crop all of the space
Yes,
that
but the
camera
frames are
covers
shit.
during this shot and render out a single frame of this open space, which I then take into Photoshop. Using this simple mock-up as a guide, I sketch out a more detailed version of the finished environment,
Okay.
usually color-coded to help me separate which elements go to which layer, and then meticulously paint it all out.
This has to be so
I do this
time-consuming.
in layers, and these layers can usually be separated into foreground and background elements. In this case, the background elements are the sea and these corals, and the foreground elements are these additional corals and the carcass. Specifically for this underwater shot, I also created a couple additional layers of cloudy ocean atmosphere as well. I then render out all of these separate 2D images and bring them back into my original 3-dimensional scene. And when all of these are lined up correctly, the shot finally starts to come together. If needed, I also add extra 2D animated details as well. For this film, these were mostly particle effects like bubbles and snow and splashing water. These can be created anyway in Photoshop or Blender, depending on the effect.
Okay.
I would call this an average backdrop, like a medium difficulty shot. Some backdrops are easier to draw, like this one, which understandably took just minutes. But some backdrops are super complicated, like this one, which took hours and hours and hours to draw.
I need to know.
I've said this time and time again, but painting all of these backdrops is easily the most time-consuming part of my filmmaking process. It takes a very, very long time to create these worlds, especially for a film this long. And Monsters Down Under in particular goes to a huge variety of different locations. From the sea to the land to the sky, it's day and night, it's in the snow and in the sun. I am very, very happy with how this film looks though. The mostly desaturated colour palette perfectly communicates the cold, alien atmosphere of the film. And even though these were some of the least detailed backdrops I've ever had to draw, I actually especially like this big open sea and the vivid red column of blood that the Kronosaurus dance around.
Yeah. Never... Yeah. I need to know which one of those Kumbarosaurus was animated and which ones were just drawn in.
Monsters Down Under has an original soundtrack created by Ivan Dutch. I told him I wanted the film to be atmospheric and alien, mysterious and dreadful, and the way Ivan took that and ran with it and weaved these unnerving themes into the very storytelling of this film, I think was just incredible.
I agree.
One of my favourite parts about this score is the recurring Kronosaurus theme that plays throughout the film, and how that motif evolves as the story develops. It starts off scary and dreadful as we know very little about these unknowable alien sea monsters. But by the end of the film, this theme has faded into something almost romantic, as we get to understand these animals as animals.
You know, I didn't even catch that. But that's an interesting
the film
detail.
Even ends on the Kronosaurus theme, but this time played beautifully and triumphantly.
Again, I didn't notice.
As these sea monsters are now recontextualized as the complex, powerful, real-life marvels of nature that they truly were.
I still like that baby.
The little baby.
It's a baba.
Baby.
Please do go check out Ivan's work if you haven't already. Links to his website, his Patreon, his whatever else are in the description. And make sure to give him a big thank you from me for his phenomenal work on this series. Like, I cannot emphasize enough how much his music has elevated these films.
Yes, yes, do it. Very good.
How's that?
Alright, evaluation. What does he think of
I
his
think
film?
the thing that bothers me the most about Monsters Down Under is also one of my favourite things about it, which is all of this snow.
Okay.
Australia was a lot colder in the early Cretaceous than it is today, but I read a lot of conflicting information about just how cold it got. Southern Australia has possible evidence of glaciation, it was within the Antarctic Circle, and would have seen months and months of total darkness during the Antarctic winter, but this film is set in the Tullabuck Formation, which is in Northern Australia.
Oh.
It was still cold, but I think was just outside of the Antarctic Circle.
Yeah, that would do it.
Yearly temperature estimates I could find for this time and place were cool to temperate with a lot of rain, a place that seasonally would at least reach, if not freezing temperatures, like near freezing temperatures. Not gonna lie, very rainy, very seasonally cold, reminded me a lot of Scotland, where I live, and Scotland does get this cold, which is what inspired me to depict the Tullabuck Formation like this in the first place. However, I haven't once seen a piece of paleo depicting Kronosaurus next to some ice,
The guy saying
which is a
hello.
pretty striking image. So while my research tells me that cold like this would be reasonable, just very rare, I can't help but shake this feeling that I've made a mistake.
Oh.
Regardless of scientific accuracy, though, I honestly wouldn't really change any of this. All of this snow and ice looks fantastic, and it serves the story. It adds to the otherworldly atmosphere of the film, and it immediately tells the viewer how different Australia was during the Cretaceous, while also being based on enough science for me to be okay with it.
Yeah.
There's also less snow and ice in this film than it might seem. It is snowing during this scene with the Mutabarosaurus, but there's actually no snow or ice anywhere else in this film.
Oh.
The cliffs that the Halaskia are resting on might look like they're covered in ice, but this white stuff was genuinely intended to be pterosaur poo.
Oh,
If
ew.
you've ever been to a seabird colony, you'll know that the cliffs are absolutely caked in this stuff.
Cooler. Yummy.
This frozen area here is also
Cooler,
technically
no.
not seawater.
I
Not entirely. It's a lake that's connected to the sea through a small channel.
don't know if
You
I
can
like.
actually see the gap that opens up
Like
into
vanilla
the
frosting.
Vanilla
Manga
frosting.
Inlet Sea.
Ugh.
Stop it!
Later, the Kronosaurus even swims through this gap, and once the salt water mixes with the fresh water, the ice disappears, because fresh water freezes at higher temperatures than seawater does.
Okay.
Another thing that doesn't really bother me, but I think might bother some others, is the somewhat cartoony behaviour of the baby Mutabarosaurus, being like too playful or cheeky, and I did second
that's
guess
fine.
this a little.
Yeah.
It's a baby
This was
dinosaur,
done
so like
deliberately.
it's a little, he's a little
I
guy.
wanted all of the
Yeah.
dinosaurs and the pterosaurs, everything above water, to feel like animals that we can understand with behaviour that's easy to read.
Okay, so
This
those
was
two were
to
animated.
contrast the totally unknowable near-alien monsters beneath the sea.
Yeah, I felt like that
I
was
wouldn't
fine.
really consider this behaviour particularly anthropomorphized either. In fact, this very bespeckled beast served as my main inspiration for all of
Oh, he
this
got a dog?
this behaviour.
Dalmatian!
I've had to live with this bespeckled beast for over a year now, and I'm not totally sure what animal it is. I think
What
it's a
animal
small
is what?
and ugly horse.
Look at that beast.
Monsters
It's so
Down Under
cute.
is one of the biggest and most time-consuming things I've ever made. It was an absolute behemoth of a project. I would estimate that the same amount of work
They're the
time
same
effort that went into
picture.
this one 16-minute film is about on par with the first 3 episodes of Dinosauria combined. More than half of Dinosauria Volume 1's workload went into just Monsters Down Under. This amount of work would be otherwise near impossible, grueling, miserable for me, for just one guy to do it all on my own, if it weren't counterbalanced by the sheer joy and inspiration I get from making all of this cool dinosaur stuff. This film is as enormous as it is because I loved making it. I anticipate this making of video to be like the longest one I've ever made, like
Yep.
45 minutes to an hour or something. It's gonna be huge, and I could talk about Monsters Down Under for another 5 more hours. Like,
Jesus.
this isn't just my favourite film of the Dinosauria series, it's easily my favourite film I've ever made. It's one of my proudest creations ever.
I respect that.
Yeah, I mean, this was really good.
It's just exactly my type
Absolute
of film.
masterpiece.
It's slow,
Yeah.
it's atmospheric, it's visual storytelling, brutality and beauty, horror and nature combined. Like, I didn't even get to talk about how this film is mostly desaturated with the vivid red blood running through the whole thing, signifying both beauty and terror, death of some things and the birth of others. I put so much into
Wow.
this. And I really do hope you guys liked it too.
Of course!
It's out of everything.
In my next Dinosauria film, however, we leave the cold sea behind and enter the dry Mongolian desert of the late Cretaceous.
It's a pina colada!
That big chunky one.
Protoceratops.
0.
Yep.
Thank you all so much for watching. If you'd like to read through the sketchbook I've been showing off in this video,
Yeah,
you
Zira.
absolutely can. Just go check out my Patreon page.
And I'm pretty
By
sure
supporting my work there, you
after
will
that
also gain
it's
access
Deinonychus.
to exclusive weekly posts, renders,
So, bingo.
artwork, and updates on my
Bingo
Dinosauria
and
series.
0.
Posts just like the ones I'm showing on screen right now.
Hey,
This is
Acro.
by far the best way to keep up to date with the Dinosauria series and directly support it. Super special thanks to all my top Patreon supporters scrolling by on screen right now. I absolutely love making dinosaur stuff, and without all these wonderful people, gigantic projects like my Dinosauria series just would not be possible. So again, thank you.
anytime, man.
Definitely.
Alright, and that was the making of Monsters Down Under. What do we think?
Enjoyed
That
it.
was really good.
I liked it. That was very nice.
I felt like after seeing this particular behind the scenes, it contextualizes a lot of like the decision making behind the things we see in this short film. There's a lot of stuff in here I didn't even think about, like the soundtrack, like having you know, a theme for the Chronosaurus. I didn't really pick up on that. And to that, I had to apologize to Ivan Dutchman. I am so sorry. I'm not very well versed in music, so that kind of went way over my head. He's still yet to actually upload his making of the soundtrack.
Maybe he's waiting for the final one and then he does it.
Well, no, because he's been releasing behind-the-scenes stuff after the actual short films dropped. But yeah, I felt like, you know, this was like one of the better Dinosauria short films, especially now that there's like some context behind all this. And I didn't even think about like the whole blood imagery. It probably has a lot more to do it than others. But yeah, like the imagery with like all the blood, like you see death and then also the bringer of life, you know, that sort of thing. I didn't pick up on that. I just thought it was just blood for the sake of blood. Yeah, I think this is awesome.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolute cinema.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I just think it's like the perfect like showcase of like art, animation, and music. Like it all just comes together so perfectly. But yeah, I'm honestly looking forward to the next short film, The Fighting Dinosaurs, which I believe is gonna be based on the fossil of the Protoceratops and the Velociraptor, that, you know, that very infamous fossil that was found in Mongolia, which I can't wait to see. How he handles it.
I fully trust him.
Oh yeah,
I trust him.
Oh yeah, I do too. This David James Armsby is a man who never led us astray.
No.
But yeah, I think that's going to be the end of it for now. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for the next time. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, subscribe today, hit the notification bell so you don't miss anything new. All my links are in the link tree in the description down below. And until next time, this is Tyrannosaurus and friends signing off. Alright then, take care now. Bye-bye then.
Bye.